Hey guys, what's going on? It's your favorite communitarian. And yeah, today I wanted to talk about why, yeah, we do actually owe each other stuff, actually. Um, there's this pretty common idea especially in the United States where I live and where most of my audience is from that no one owes you anything, right? Like if people have a problem with the way other people act or with the way society is, and in the case of the United States, um with how hyper individualistic and with how alienated and atomized everyone is. So you know people just kind of um either just go to school or work, come home, go to sleep. Maybe they binge watch whatever streaming service, or sit down and play whatever freemium game or whatever, and then they go to sleep and repeat again, right? And in that, in those moments, you'll probably only um interact with maybe three or four other people max, maybe a little bit more depending on your job, but in the end, it's not a lot. And the type of connection is very transactional, right? And if you're lucky enough, maybe you have a partner, but let's be real, most don't. Um, or if they do, at most they have a booty call, right? Let's be real. And I'm sorry guys, but if if we want to get rid of that, which I do actually think this generation has, kind of awakened to, Gen Z, later millennials, and Gen Alpha, who are coming up right now, their oldest members. Um if we want to fight that, yes, you're going to have to practice reciprocity in your day to day with others, with actual other human beings. And that's going to require a little bit of sacrifice, of inconvenience on your part. I think it boils down to the fact that, for whatever reason, people don't want to be inconvenienced by anyone else ever. Like, you know, when we look at relationships in this sort of environment, in this sort of culture, um, like, it's only about what we can get from each other or what I can get from you. It's not about, for example, genuinely helping another human being. I understand, and I'm not even gonna pretend like self interest or doing things for other, making yourself feel good isn't a motivation. But at the same time, I'll give an example. I'm obviously not gonna say any names, but I've been a person that has, and I don't say this, I'm not bragging or anything, I'm not trying to make myself look like a good person, because I don't think that this is like this makes me a good person or anything. I just think it makes me a person, right? Like, I have on many occasions helped bring people back from the brink of unaliving themselves, guys. And, they always tell me, like, hey, Gabe, I don't know who else to turn to. You're the only one that really understands me because X, Y, and Z, whether it be their family, another trusted and close friend, um, would just tell me like, I don't know, man, or not really validate my feelings or not take me back from the brink. And um I mean, what can I say? It's tough, and it's in those moments where I really realize, like, wow, the West is cooked, neoliberal capitalism is done, and I do think that that's another big portion, especially in the U.S., where we're essentially in a second Gilded Age, where essentially, like, you have to basically, essentially work and have no time for literally anything else, which I know boomers are gonna have a hard time understanding. Boomers and Gen X, because they grew up um in a time of such prosperity, which by the way, for um um income over $400,000, which I think now would be around 4 million, 4.5 million adjusted for inflation. The effective tax rate after those 400,000 was taxed at 90%, unfathomably based tax structure. But yeah, you guys benefited from that. I'm sorry to say. And that's social democracy, or what we call socialism. But it's really social democracy because, as we know, socialism is not when the government does stuff. Socialism is when workers have control of their workplaces. uh, and speaking of that, bro, union membership was so high. How do you think you were able to support uh a family and like buy a house and on one single working class job? Not all of it, right? A lot of it was the like conflict economy from a certain conflict specifically for you know white soldiers, not soldiers of color, by the way. People also forget about that. That had that, but a lot of it was also, strong industry with collective bargaining that was able to raise wages. And we're seeing the return of that based in, especially in these last 3 to 4 years. Like, I'm just obviously it's not where it should be, but I'm just amazed at the return of organized labor, guys. Um and like, yeah, it kind of is all downstream from there. You were kind of still able to do that in the early 2000s to even the beginning of the 2010s and stuff. I know because my mom, a working class woman, like, working class migrant woman, and my dad, a working class migrant man, um, we're sort of able to do it, but also not really, because we were still poor. We still had to rely a lot on charity. Um, especially towards the end with my dad, like we got to the point where we were actually going to the food bank or relying on at that time our messianic synagogue to give us food. um but yeah, guys, I mean, we also have barely any third places. What, a Starbucks that's super small and literally optimized just to get you in and out of the door as fast as possible. Yeah, it has some wimpy stools. Okay, you're gonna sit in there for a prolonged period of time. Maybe if you're lucky, you have outdoor seating, but obviously that only works in certain seasons, especially if it snows where you live. I'm lucky enough to have a Starbucks that's like that. And I actually have been on or went out for coffee with a lot of my friends. Never like a romantic thing, but I have done that. I also live next to a park, but I where I do go for walks when the season is nice, but again, I know most people are not as lucky. Um and like again, we're just so cooked, man, socially. We're just so cooked, and everyone is just retreating further and further into their internet bubbles, and as we saw from certain PDF files, both literally and figuratively, um this isn't even about party, guys, because we know that both parties are entrenched in the same system, and that they're highest earners, they're elite, which I'm not necessarily opposed to having an elite. I know some of you aren't gonna like hearing that, but like intellectually, at least, I think it's healthy to have an elite sometimes, but not an elite that is like just going around doing stuff, which again, PDF files, just go in and read them, right? Like, it's all a part of the same system, guys. Capitalism. And now, again, I acknowledge that it's not just capitalism, it's also American culture, which pushes everyone to be individuals and stuff like that. Another example, which I've kind of talked about before, but it's like the the dismantling of the family, guys. Now, the gender roles within those families I don't particularly care about, but guys, that I am very strongly in favor of the structure of the family itself. Uh, that's kind of like, especially on the left. I know it. I just said it doesn't really matter, but it's like, in the circles that I run in, that's kind of a controversial opinion. But like, I still do think that strong families matter, especially the presence of a strong father figure. Again, not that you have to act in like the strictly patriarchal ways or whatever, because, like, for example, me, I would love to be a stay-at-home dad. Um, but like, I don't know. I just think of where I was originally born, Guatemala, guys. Like, and in basically all other countries in the world, um almost, aside from like the UK, the US, and a lot of places in Northern Europe, but even then, like, it's kind of normalized that you live with your parents until you either get married or make enough money to strike out on your own. Now, in the US again, because we're in a second gilded age, um like it's just kind of not feasible. So that has started to change, but not because the overall culture is changing itself, but because due from necessity. Like, if we enter another, let's say, progressive era where the difference between the haves and the have nots equalizes again, because it could happen again, right? I hope it does. Um like, I don't know if the actual communitarian values will still be there, because, like, you look at the Nordics and people often point to the Nordics as like a shining example of quote unquote socialism, even though it's only social democracy. But what I would say to that is that, like, the Nordics actually have really low business taxes. And bro, just look at the unalive rate for the Nordics. That it's not pretty, especially for men, guys. Like, um so I do think that, we need to look more critically at that as well, because we still those places still don't have workplace democracy. Wink, wink. Um, now they do have it better than the United States, of course. I wish we, like a lot of Americans, I wish we could um be more like them, because it would honestly make things better, right? But again, you know, and I go even further back when I think of this, but, like, think of the like classical vision, like the Jeffersonian vision of the United States that was, later integrated into pioneer mythology and stuff like that. You have your small little farm, and your kids or whatever, your cattle, and I can understand that life, guys. My maternal grandfather was actually a cattle herder from uh Chiquimula, from a small little town that I think is now a part of, like, the municipality or city of Chiquimula, called Shusha Abajo. And he kind of lived his life like that. I can understand that, but, like, you know there was still community. It wasn't just about me, me, me. This is my farm, X, Y, and Z. No, like, in Guatemala, we still have that, like, strong sense. Like, people visit each other's houses, guys. It's not like the 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 suburbs and stuff like that, where people are, I mean, suburbs also do exist, but, like, for example, in the condo where my family has a house, like, or I guess the settlement, neighborhood. Like, most things are within walking distance. There's a school, there's a church, there are like little shops, tienditas, where you can like buy basic goods. You call up el chino de la tienda and you can have like bread, milk, um dobladas, which I think Americans would call like a quesadilla. Um, Although they're a little different because they don't use wimpy flour tortillas, but yeah, stuff like that, and it's like, there are all these intersections: urban design, culture, like, and the thing is, I someone tried to tell me that, oh, it's not about individualism, actually. It's about tribalism. Well, I'm like, no, it's not, because, again, this sort of thinking has always been a part of the American national mythology, always. Like, this sort of my way or the highway type thing. And you know what? In a lot of ways, it's worked, kind of, but it's only worked for a certain class of people with power and privilege, mainly the rich. And, over the years, it's wax and wane for sure. Like I said, boomers grew up in the immediate post conflict period and reaped all the benefits. Gen X kind of a little bit. And notice that I didn't say much about the silent generation or the greatest generation, because they're kind of based. They had to grow up during the Great Depression, and that shaped a lot of their views. And so, but like, I don't know, man. Just be good to one another. And I, as a disabled man, especially, like, I a lot of people either just can't be bothered to like give me a hand, usually, to like help me get out, or or um they're just scared, right? They don't know how to approach hanging out with me, what to do, what to say. And I would just say, just ask, man. And even if you're not disabled, but just ask, bro. Don't be scared. Like, we're human beings just like you. Most of us know what's going on, even if we happen to have an intellectual disability. Like, we're we still like being around people for the most part. We still want that connection. And, like, guys, like, be inconvenienced a little bit. Listen to your homies and your homegirls and your home people. Like, be there for them. Sacrifice yourself a little bit. Now, don't sacrifice all of yourself, because you can't overdo things, of course. I'm learning that. Like, I have a bit of a savior complex, which I'm working on. But, like, yeah, guys, if you want to build the society where more of us are connected, not all of us are lonely and kind of alienated, of course, work towards higher political aims but also realize that yes, you do owe each other kindness and courtesy and at least a little bit to be inconvenienced, to not just have it about be about mutual benefit and have it end there, or consent. You can go beyond choice, beyond consent when it matters most. Of course, when it's with someone's body and stuff like that, of like consent should be the final word, of course, but I'm talking more about like, you know, being there for your friends, listening to their problems, especially men. This is kind of like a prelude to another video that I'm gonna do about male solidarity. But yeah, guys, I guess that's my entire rant. If you made it this far, thank you so much. But yeah, um, love each other, guys. Care for each other. Remember the files. Remember that this is kind of um this whole culture stuff. While yes, it's important to look at it, ultimately it's a distraction because they don't want us to look at ourselves and look at each other. Bye.